Hello, super brains. Welcome to the ADHD Brains in Business show, week 2. And today I want to delve into a little bit about hormones and how they can affect our ADHD symptoms when they show up, and what we can do to protect ourselves, look after ourselves, advocate for ourselves, and get the help that we need. Because there is certainly a link between our hormones and how we show up and how that affects our symptoms. So I'm going to dive straight in. If you are watching on replay, please hashtag replay and put some love hearts on so that other people get to see this broadcast. And I would love to know as we go through if anything resonates with you or if you have any questions or anything. So the first thing that when I talk about hormones, what I'm really talking about mostly is our female hormones, so our sex hormones. So in a woman, that's progesterone, testosterone, and estrogen, 3 really important hormones for a woman, and 3 hormones that ebb and flow at various times in our lives. And what we know now is that these do have a real effect on ADHD symptoms. And a lot of women who struggle with ADHD really find that there are certain times in the month when their symptoms go a bit overboard. So let me give myself a love heart here. So there are certain times in the month where it can really exacerbate our symptoms. There are certain times in our lives when it can really kick in. So first of all, what do we know so far about the link between ADHD and our hormones? And the answer is really not very much at all. And the reason is because most research on ADHD has been done on prepubescent boys. Women are really difficult to research because we have hormones, and really expensive to research because we're quite unpredictable, because our hormones can skew results. So there is really not very much research into hormones and how they affect our ADHD. But what I'm going to share with you is what we know so far, and also what we can kind of work out because of the effect of particularly estrogen has on our bodies and our cognitive functioning and our brains, which is a huge part for us super brains. So there are 3 times in a woman's life. If you are on, give me some love, say hello, let me know that you are there. Let me get so that I can see some comments as well. And if you have any questions or anything that comes up for you, then please just pop them in the chat and we will get back to you. So when does it show up for us girls? Well, there are 3 times when it really kind of like can crack open our symptoms. The first time is in puberty. Now, puberty is a difficult time for any girl, any boy, really. It's a tough time for all of us when our hormones suddenly kick in. And unfortunately, what happens is because we don't get a nice increase in estrogen over time, and it comes on really gentle, it doesn't go like that. It's like a light switch, and it comes up and down and up and down, which is why we get so many fluctuations. We get these moods that can be high or low. And so the first time is in puberty. The second time is after having a baby. So after childbirth. So what can happen is women with ADHD actually find that when they are pregnant, quite often their symptoms almost disappear. They can feel very calm, very happy, very together. And then also after we have the baby and the oxytocin comes in, it can be a really nice calming time. However, what happens after a while is that then falls away, and it can fall away quite quickly and it can plummet. So what they've found and assumed is that a lot of women with ADHD can suffer with postnatal depression, when the hormones that have kept us feeling so good suddenly go away. The other time that it can kick in is in perimenopause and menopause. And that's kind of the area that I'm working in mostly, and the kind of stuff that I'm seeing. And my journey with ADHD and understanding it has probably started coming into my life about 4 years ago, when the women that I was working with who are perimenopausal. So let's just talk about perimenopause and when it actually starts. So perimenopause is when our body's estrogen starts to drop. And again, it doesn't drop in a nice linear way. It drops in this light switch on and off sort of way. So actually, the average age of menopause in the UK is 51. Perimenopause starts up to 10 years before that. It actually can start in our late 30s. The body will start to change, but most of us won't really start to really notice changes until we get to maybe our early 40s. And that's when things start to change. And the way that I hear it change most with women is like you go from having one not so great week a month to maybe half the month you feel good, half the month you don't. And then what I start to hear is as women get close to menopause, is it goes to kind of like, you know what, I feel okay for 1 week, and for 3 weeks I feel awful. The time the symptoms really kind of kick in is about 3 years before menopause. So when I'm talking about those symptoms, I'm talking about hot flushes, I'm talking about mood swings, anxiety is a huge thing, lack of energy is massive, and just this probably even more struggles with regulating our emotions. As our estrogen falls away. Now, estrogen has one of the things in menopause, the symptoms is the brain fog, is the forgetting things. I have heard from so many women over the years, you know, as they enter this time of going, I thought I had dementia, I thought I had Alzheimer's, I thought something really awful was happening to me, because suddenly, and you'll hear it from me as you get to know me on these lives, words disappear and things disappear, and suddenly, you know, halfway through a sentence, you don't know, you know, you're like, oh, I don't know what I was saying. Now, as estrogen disappears, it affects our cognitive functioning. So it affects our memory and, you know, forgetting people's names. Why did I walk in this room? All that sort of stuff. Well, those are also, so short-term memory is a big thing for ADHD. We're not so bad. We're quite good at long-term memory, but it's the short-term, like, what am I doing here? What am I in the middle of here? So if you look at the brain is covered, every area of the brain is covered with estrogen receptors. So when our estrogen starts to leave our bodies and we start to produce less of it, then this affects our cognitive functioning. Now, we already struggle with this. So you can see how now the symptoms can start really rearing up, which is what happened with me. You know, I always say, well, having ADHD was no big surprise to me. And actually, it didn't really do me any harm until I got into my early 40s, where suddenly I really burnt out. Suddenly I wasn't as resilient as I was. You know, our resilience starts to become more difficult to keep hold of. And so actually, this is a time when we don't have the help from the estrogen to keep us going. And so symptoms can become really crack us open. And like I say, they can start to come in around the age of about 48. I'm 49 in a few weeks. So guess what? I'm right in the eye of the storm. And it really has become a point where, you know, actually I would have whole days where I would just be going from one thing to another. And I get to the end of the day and I really hadn't achieved anything. And like I say, I would feel very tired very quickly, find it even more difficult to, probably not so difficult to regulate my outbursts, because that's something I've learned to deal with much better as I've got older, but certainly to regulate my overthinking. So overthinking, anxiety, already a problem in menopause for many women, because estrogen is a really good feel-good hormone. So what happens in our cycle is we have 2 weeks where estrogen's really high, then estrogen drops away, and then we can move into that side of things where we start to feel more hormonal, more PMTE. And it's the same in menopause. The thing with menopause is, like I say, it's like this light switch. So one day, which is one of the reasons that actually you don't test for, and I'd love to know, if you're watching this, kind of what age you're at and where you feel you're at in this cycle, because it will really help you. So we don't test for perimenopause. The only time that a doctor will do a blood test or a hormone test to see where you are in the menopause is if you're actually already on HRT. And the reason is because one day you can show up as being right bang in the middle of a menopause, and another day you can show up as not being in menopause at all because of that light switch effect. So it's quite difficult to diagnose perimenopause just on a blood test. So what actually doctors do is they go by symptoms. And if you are struggling right now, let me know, because I have a really good symptom checker that you can go into your GP with, so you can advocate for yourself, and you can also monitor your symptoms throughout a month and then actually throughout the year to see where you are. So those are the 3 times when actually our symptoms can really kind of spike. Now, for me, one of the things that a woman can do in menopause is look at HRT. And that for me was the first place that I started, because I wasn't diagnosed for ADHD. I was feeling extremely symptomatic. I was feeling really quite low, really quite desperate. All of the symptoms, never feeling like you've done enough, never feeling like you have enough, never feeling like you are enough, getting anxious over strange things. Even the rejection side of things was coming to me more in menopause than it ever had before. But where I really did find it showing up was in my business, because I really felt all the time like I was taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So for me, going on HRT was something that I could do without a diagnosis. And I did that in December. And I have to say that within about a week of being on HRT, I did start to feel a lot better, and my symptoms are far more manageable now. Now, HRT, just to give you a bit of background on that, HRT has had a really bad rap. There was a women's health study done back in I think it started in the 90s. And what the information, the first sort of wave of research came out that HRT was causing breast cancer in women. And the media jumped on this, and overnight the amount of women on HRT literally dropped by half. Doctors didn't want to prescribe it. Women didn't want to go on it. It was a big thing for me. My mum's had breast cancer twice. She's still with us. But, it's something that I'm very aware of, is the fact that breast cancer is in my family. But actually, what happened was the study didn't finish. The study continued on. And what they actually found out was that actually your chances of having breast cancer from HRT are really very, very low. And actually what they'd done is the group of women that they were testing on had a few things that were already giving them red flags for breast cancer. And that was that many of them were overweight. Many of them were already in their 50s. And we know that, as you get older, your chances of breast cancer does increase. And so actually what was found to be was that this research wasn't actually the full picture. The study kept going for years. And I think in the early 2000s, in like 2008, 2009, the full stuff was, the full results were put out, and actually it was found that HRT was actually very, very, very beneficial for women. And that actually really what happens in menopause is that we have a lack of hormones, and so that actually what we need is some hormone replacement. Now, if you are as you got older, you could get type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is something that can come in older people as the pancreas stops producing insulin, because basically it's wearing out. And it's a little bit like what happens in us. And interestingly, a friend of mine put a post on today about the average life expectancy of a woman. And in the early 1900s, women, the average age was about 47, 48. So actually, a lot of women didn't even get to menopause. So what we're experiencing is quite a new thing. Now, the average age now is about 82. So obviously, menopause now is kind of midlife, and we actually are spending half of our life in menopause. So the things that you need to know from that is perimenopause can start to show in your early 40s. So if you are suddenly thinking, wow, what's going on? And your symptoms seem a little bit more than you would expect, then that is definitely a time when it can kind of crack ADHD wide open. So those are the 3 times for a woman that actually symptoms can really get harder to manage. It's during puberty, it's after you've had a baby, and it's in peri to postmenopause. And one of the things that you can do from that to help yourself there, if you're in peri to postmenopause, is get some HRT. You can go on HRT as early as your early 40s. It's been shown to have lots of benefits for our cognitive functioning. There's even talk of HRT being used to help in Alzheimer's, because actually what they are realizing is that estrogen can act very similar to a neurotransmitter in the brain, i.e. it does really affect our cognitive functioning. So there's that side of things. What else was I going to say about that? I've lost my train of thought. Anyway, so that's what, those are the times. Oh, that's what I was going to say. And with HRT, if you want to go to the GP and you want to start thinking about it, but you are concerned about all the media and the stuff out there, you are at far more risk of breast cancer if you are overweight. You are far more risk of breast cancer if you have a couple of glasses of wine a day than you are if you have HRT. But what you want to do is ask for the right HRT. So I had to tell my clients to go in and ask for what we call body identical HRT. And body identical HRT is made from yams. It mimics the estrogen in our bodies. It's exactly the same under the microscope, and I'm a massive advocate. I was a big advocate when I watched clients go on it. I saw the difference it made to them. I'm an even bigger now advocate now that I have it myself. So what you want is body identical HRT. Usually that comes in estrogen patches and a progesterone tablet that you take. Those are the two most natural body identical ways. And that's what you would really need to go and ask for. If you want the symptom checker, then just post you in the notes below and I will make sure that I get that out to you. So we've covered when a woman has, when it really spikes, and we have talked about what we know, which really isn't a great deal. What we do know is that women with ADHD and girls with ADHD do very often have much higher PMT and symptoms, and they can have really quite bad PMS, PMD, is it called? This really debilitating time in their cycle. So what can we do to work around it when the time of our month interferes with our cycle? So the first thing that I get clients to do is make sure that they're tracking their menstrual cycle. So have a tracker on your phone, something that because I guarantee you, and actually when you come into this second part of your month, so you have let's say you've got a 28-day cycle. Days about 5 to 14, 15 or what I used to call your Venus week. This is an amazing time for you, and you should generally notice that your ADHD symptoms are more manageable. You feel more in control. You feel more able to get up and get stuff done. You feel more like being out in the world. You feel more confident. You feel more self-assured. And actually, as you get to days sort of 14, 15, 16, you are going to be more attractive, because that's when you're coming to ovulation, and that's when your body is preparing you to find a mate. So you'll be letting off all sorts of signals. Your hair will be more shiny, your skin will be, and your eyes will be brighter, and you will just be firing on all cylinders. Great time to get stuff done. So if you are tracking your cycle, you can think, do you know what? Those first 2 weeks are the weeks where I put the tough work in, are the weeks where I do the stuff that takes organization. For me, those are the weeks when I know that I can actually sit and write a sales page, where I can sit and write a workshop or something like that. The last 2 weeks for me, I know if I find myself, one of my symptoms is I eat more, I snack more. And I used to, now in the second part of your cycle, you do need about an extra 300 calories a day. However, that's not why I was eating. I would be like, what's wrong with me? I literally, I'll give you an example. Sometimes I'll make myself a cup of tea, come up, do a bit of work, and think, I'll go and have a cup of tea. When I get downstairs, I've got half a cup of warm tea still in my cup. And it's just that hot, impulsive squirrel thing, getting distracted and finding myself. It gets really bad in the second half of my cycle, and I can guarantee, I know it now. I think to myself, oh my gosh, it must be day 10. I must be 10 days from my period, because that for me is the time. So look about the week before your period and think how you can build that in to your schedule. So for me, I can coach during that time. I can show up during that time. I'm not so great at social media. So quite often I make sure I've got my social media scheduled for that time. So I don't have to show up. So I don't have to put myself through that. If I want to, I can, but there's something to go out. And I also make sure that that is a time when I am doing less of the stuff that takes my concentration, my focus, and for me to be fully present. It's also a time when we tend to get more exhausted and tired. So more self-care can come in. Now, one lady who has been researching this says that this can also be a time when, for some ADHD clients, your medication may not work. You might think, gosh, it's not having any effect at all today. What can help is an SSRI, an antidepressant. I actually have a supplement that I adore called 5-HTP. Now, this is super, super, super important. 5-HTP is a supplement that does exactly the same as an antidepressant, as an SSRI, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And how an antidepressant works is it basically stops the reuptake of excess serotonin in the brain. So what it does is it leaves more floating around. Now, if you then take 5-HTP, you're adding more in, and this can be really dangerous. So the golden rule is you cannot do this if you already take antidepressants. You cannot take 5-HTP. If you don't already take an antidepressant, but you know that you tank in the second half of your cycle, then taking 5-HTP, 100 milligrams of 5-HTP a day in that second half of your cycle can really help prop up your mood, prop up your energy, help you concentrate a little bit more. So that's something that I recommend to quite a few of my clients that aren't on an SSRI. That's just, I can't tell you how important that is. You can't take both at the same time because it does exactly the same. So it's just like doubling up your medication, which is not a good idea. So those are the sorts of things that we can do. We can track, we can look at things like 5-HTP, we can be a bit kinder to ourselves. We can let ourselves off the hook a little bit, that maybe we are a bit more distracted, we are a bit less focused, we are a bit more ADHD, and the kind of super brain side of things seems more of a distant memory because, I think that we do have super brains. Do I think ADHD is a superpower? Not so convinced by that, because there are lots of times when I don't feel like I've got a superpower with ADHD. I feel very different. But there are also times when I know that I'm unstoppable. I know the closer I get to my period, the less unstoppable I become, and I actually go into more of a stoppable. So I make sure my social engagements aren't overwhelming. I make sure I spend more time having baths, doing my self-care. I also exercise less harshly at that point in my cycle. So I might do more yoga, more walking, more connecting with nature, because really, if you think about what the cycle's doing, is during that time, it's preparing you to get pregnant. It's then making you gorgeous, want to be out in the world, and then it's taking you down to nurture your egg. So looking at your cycle, how you respond to it, how it goes is super, super important, because when we are aware of this, we can focus on it. And when we can focus on it, we can change it. But when we aren't so aware, it's so much more difficult to change stuff. And the other side of this is how we can help ourselves outside of that. And there are lots of things that we can do to look after ourselves. It is looking after our nutrition. It is getting regular exercising. It is doing meditation. It is maybe journaling. It is not, the main thing is not overscheduling ourselves. That's the main thing. Quite often, I spoke with a client the other day who had scheduled in a load of stuff in her kind of Venus week for the weeks where she was due to come on her period, and her ADHD symptoms were all over the show, and she didn't want to show up, and she was scared of being rejected, and all of the things, pardon me, the anxiety was higher. There was far more emotional, far more exhausted. And actually what we did was we went and we took some of the things out of her schedule. So those first 2 to 3 weeks are when you want to schedule in the tough stuff. That week before your period, schedule in less, be at home more, give yourself more space. Okay, if you have any questions, if you want to ask anything, if you want me to give you the symptom checker, then just pop a comment, something in the comments below and I will get back to you. And if there's anything you want to see on the show, then let me know. Next week, we've got Lauren Prentice joining us, who is a multi-six-figure business owner. She's got seven businesses, all of which absolutely fly. The girl is phenomenal, and she's got ADHD. And so she's going to tell us how she manages to spin all these plates and do it, and share some of her top tips for managing ADHD in business. Have an awesome weekend, and I will see you on the other side. Thanks for listening.